Happy Wednesday, everybody.
Thanks, Brian. You too. I'm going to go ahead and, Nancy, do we see the mayor joining us here?
Not yet, Vice Mayor.
Okay, I think I'm just going to get us rolling. He can jump in here any minute. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's a work session. Wednesday, 6 o'clock on the 5th month, the 11th day in 2022. So let's start out with public comments. Here comes Paul, it looks like. Do we have any public comments? I see 2 people in our attendees, and I'm wondering if either of you wanted to make a public comment.
Vice Mayor, I believe they're both our staff members.
And
okay.
Doherty,
yeah.
who is now with us. You folks get a little hot to trot before we get all of our people here. 6:01. We'll be all right. Welcome, Councilmember O'Doherty. Let's go ahead and make sure we've got everybody here. Looks like it. Vice Mayor, I appreciate you getting these meetings going on just 2 things. I will stick up for the tardy and the disorganized, being one of the primary members of that group. However, actually, I wonder if any of the rest of you had this. When I signed in for the Zoom meeting, it made me wait for a little update of software. Did that happen to anybody else? Not like a regular one, just like a little short one. Councilmember Schuster, I see you nodding. Okay. And that added a little bit more delay than usual.
It wanted to do it last night, so I was afraid I was going to get kicked off, do its update, and then have to try to re-sign back on. So it wanted to do it last night, but I wouldn't let it.
Yeah, I guess can't complain about it too much. I don't want to get Zoom bombed and whatever else they're trying to update for, but in any case, that did take an extra minute or so, and I'm sitting here going, here I am trying to get on, trying to actually be there at 6, and I got a Zoom update. Anyway, there wasn't any public comment, and you guys have listened to me natter on about my concerns, so why don't we just go ahead and get into the beginning of the work session with whoever's going to kick that off for us. I think it's the city manager. Hello, city manager.
Hi, Mayor and Council. Good evening. How's everybody?
Okay.
You all again. Obviously, attendance shows how scintillating our budget reviews are. Sadly for me, I think it's super cool and one of the best parts of the year, but I'm apparently somewhat alone. Let me say we wanted to start off tonight actually talking about our phenomenal budget team. So I wanted to recognize Jennifer Wade, our Administrative Services Director, and give her a moment to talk about the team in preparing the budget this year. We often talk about the fact that the budget seems to get better and better every year, and I think this year, has continued that trend. And Jennifer had some new staff members and some older, more seasoned staff members working with her this year. So we wanted to give you a chance to see those folks kind of working behind the scenes. Hi, Jennifer.
Thanks, City Manager Jordan, and thanks, Council, for the opportunity to just recognize, I think, the really hard and dedicated work of the city's budget team. And so really, the folks I'm going to highlight tonight, you know, the executive team is part of the budget team, but the folks I'm going to talk about tonight are the folks on our finance team. I know that when we get the budget publication, it looks more like a narrative by the time it gets to you, and that's very intentional because we want it to be transparent, accessible, facilitate great work sessions, right? And I really hope that it does that. But to compile this book, our team from the middle of December until the end of June They touch and retouch hundreds of numbers, what feels like thousands of times. It requires tremendous diligence and patience, and I think a real love for what you do, because I don't know why you would do it if you didn't love it and think that it really contributed value to the community. And I feel like I have a team of people that does feel that way. And I'm honored to work alongside of them. I'd like to highlight the other two team members tonight. The first is Louise Johnson. Louise and I have worked together for 9 years. Heartbreakingly to me, she has decided that maybe after an entire career in finance, that she might just want to do something different for a while. And so she actually will be leaving city employment in a couple of months. And that is heartbreaking, but I am so happy for her. But she has been a pillar of our team for a long time. The other employee, and he is an attendee tonight, he's asked to not be made public, but he is out there, is a gentleman named Spencer Katuri. And so he has been with the city for about a year, and he has just been a phenomenal addition to the budget team. I think there's an initiation process during the first year of budget where you say, whoa, I can't believe it takes this much work and this much checking. And he bore it with such grace and goodwill and a great attitude. And I think he deserves tremendous acknowledgement for that. And so if you'll join me in just saying thank you to the budget team, I think they'd really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
Director Wade, Spencer does not want to join us, right?
No, I do not
I know
believe he does.
he's on the attendee side, but
He said for this year, he would just stay as an attendee. So I'd like to honor that.
That's great.
absolutely,
Yeah.
of course.
You know, something I'd like to point out at the end of this, because the city manager was teasing a little bit about people maybe not joining us from the public to be super excited about the budget. On the other hand, something to note is that I did see a piece of local reporting that really did emphasize the budget and the budget process and describe the budget as having a wealth of information available to people in plain language. I think that's high praise, frankly. That's more than we can say about a lot of other public budgets available to people to find on the internet. When you go look at the state of Wyoming's budget, it is not accessible and in plain language. So I frankly think that's worth noting as well. That means that people can go get it. And I think it has been improving. Those of us that have been here for a little while or for a real long time, I think we have seen become a more and more accessible and transparent document over the years. And I think we're going to continue that trend. And that's a big deal. I think that's great. So we really appreciate the work of that budget team. We really, really do. Thank
you, Mayor. I hope it comes off that we are indeed passionate about what we do. And so we'll keep doing it. And I hope you all have a great work session this evening.
Thank you. So maybe they don't join us at the meeting, City Manager, but maybe they look at the stuff later and then they can email us. I don't know. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, actually. We do publish that budget to the city's website, and it remains there all year long for members of the public. Staff refer to it. I'm sure you all refer to it. So when we review it, that's not the only opportunity for the public to find information. So thank you to the budget team. Thanks to Director Wade for her leadership through this. She and her team have done a phenomenal job, and we much appreciate it. So with that, I guess we can get down to the work of the evening, and we will have Chief Johnson chiming in here. The agenda for this evening is to start off with fire and EMS, as I had promised you last evening. And I want to, while Dan gets his camera on, I wanted to acknowledge that I erred last night in covering his supplemental recommendations. Upon looking at the agenda I created, I realized that I had actually told him that we would cover those this evening along with his PowerPoint presentation. So it was my error that caused the chief to appear to be absent last night, and I'm sorry for that. Recognizing, though, that we have covered the supplemental requests or recommendations that have gone through our process that are on page 40, I thought we would go ahead and start there, give the chief a chance to answer any questions that you all might have. As we mentioned last night, there are a good handful of supplemental recommendations in the fire department budget. They total $58,900. We're going to deep dive in a PowerPoint into the pilot program for paramedicine, or not paramedicine, for paramedic staff to be added to our staff for a year. But if you have questions on anything else before we start that PowerPoint, feel free to ask those of the chief now.
Welcome, Chief Johnson. We were missing you last night. Glad you guys got that figured out. You know, with that information that was covered last night for us, the city manager did do a thorough job for us. And I don't know that we had a lot of questions then, but we may get into some more as we cover some of this other material. I don't see anyone's hand coming up right now, Chief or City Manager, so maybe we'll just go ahead.
Okay, great. So City Clerk, I had forwarded to you the PowerPoint to move into. Council, similar to last night, we did prepare a fairly short PowerPoint. In this case, there is no budget page numbers to reference back to. Really, the only notation in your budget workbook about what we're going to talk about is just that supplemental request for $200,000. So with that, I'm going to let the chief shine, and I'm going to be quiet and let him walk you through this information that I'd asked him to put together for you tonight. And then at the end of the presentation, when we talk about the addition of the paramedic pilot program, I'll be happy to answer questions as well.
Well,
Members of council, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Sure.
So I'll just go through this PowerPoint with you and hit the high points and then stand for questions. So we could go to the next slide, Nancy. Before we got into the money, I wanted to request to spend. I figured I would talk about some of the revenue that we're bringing in and some of the increases in revenue that we've achieved over the last year. So I've got these lined out. Our Albany County Fire District Service Operational Agreement with them. We're going from $90,000 back up to $121,000 just due to our responsibilities within the fire district. As you're aware, last month we signed an EMS agreement with the county commissioners, and that 112,500 that you see is for a 6-month period covering January 1st to June 30th of this year. I will be bringing before you in the second meeting of June the agreement. It's the same agreement, but it has the updated fiscal component before 2022 to 2023, and that's going to be $225,000. Our EMS, it wasn't that many years ago, we were making $836,000 with our EMS agreement. We've got a core payment that adds up to $900,000 a year, and we do a true up based off of the revenue that's brought in on an annual basis. And the true up for last year was $1.335 million. That should be going up. Our call load's going up, so that'll be going up. I expect it to be between 1.4 to 1.5 on the EMS charges for next year. You see us at athletic games, just the university alone, and we have just a couple of things left to bill out for this year, but we're sitting at $47,247. Some other minor events put us right up around $50,000 that we've worked for EMS. The wildland revenue that we make is always an estimation. I always put in an estimation of $50,000 a year. Some years it's more, some years it's less. We require backfill for our personnel before we go out on a fire for a federal fire. So we're never a priority early in the season. So if we have a long fire season, they'll be calling us for resources, but we require them to pay backfill for us. I also want to talk about grant applications that we have out or ones that we're currently spending. Grant applications really help support a lot of our operations. We have a hazardous materials emergency preparedness grant application in for $75,000 over. It's a 3-year grant, and it requires a 20% match. The State Homeland Security Program, we have a current application in for $150,000 that has no match in a 2-year performance period. We have the repurposed. I put that in just as a reminder. I don't know if you'll remember, I came before you when the COVID was running rampant, a lot of that money was for training, and a lot of training and travel got shut down, and we just were unable to spend the money. So working with the state, we were able to repurpose 2 grants into 1 grant, and they let me buy equipment with it. And we're just finishing up in June with that. So we also have a federal assistance to firefighter grant application in for $167,328. Now, there's no guarantee that those will be funded, but I expect revenue from all those sources for the next year. So that's the revenue picture coming in. I want to talk next about our call load, what it's been doing. Can you go to the next slide, Nancy? Thank you. I just did from 2016 to 2022 on this, and I don't know what yours looks like, but our pictures are covering up the right side of the thing. But anyway, in 2016, we ran around just over 3,700 calls. And then this year, last year, we were right at just short of 4,600. And the curve, if you see it going up to the right, it ends, we're on a projection to be at about 4,675 right now at the rate we're going.
Yeah, we can see the whole graph, and it looks like it's well on its way to the figures you just quoted, maybe even, way up to 4,800.
So the most important thing about this graph is, the call load is going up, and we've been handling that, but we end up. I had long discussions with Janine about this, as far as we're exposed to failure with a lack of staffing when we're running all these other calls. So we always have to be ready for the next call also. Along with that call load, we still have our checkouts to do, our maintenance to do, our business inspections to do, physical training, hydrants, hose testing, training programs. So that work doesn't disappear for us. So the expanding call load is stressing out and that's what we're here for. That's the primary function, but it is really increasing. The biggest impact type call for hours dedicated, and if you could go to the next slide, Nancy, you'll see that our transfers, this is interfacility transfers of patients from our town to another town. We go to several places, but our primary places are Denver, Loveland, Fort Collins, and Cheyenne. If you average out the short ones with the long ones, we average about 5 hours on these transfers. In 2015, we did just over 300 transfers. Last year, we did over 600, and we're projected to do more than 600 this year. Excuse me. When you take that 600 number and you add in those hours and divide it by a 20/80 normal work schedule, that's really 3 FTEs right there of our staffing, just sucked up into patient transfers. And that's an important slide just for the impact to our department. The next slide. Our staffing levels, we have FTEs as approved by council for 14 per shift line firefighters, for 42 line firefighters. We set our staffing levels for minimums and operate 3 stations based off of our minimum levels. Those minimum levels, we toyed with 10, but we were really exposed to what I call failure at 10. We just didn't have enough people to cover the call load. A good example today is we had 12 guys on duty, and within 30 minutes, we had 5 guys out on a traffic accident that had 2 fatalities with an extrication truck. We had a rescue to do out at a lake, and we had a city structure fire all at the same time. So we can be pretty well staffed, and then real quick be real thin staffed. So I was actually with me and one other guy in the station for quite a while. So.
Chief, when you say failure, you're talking about that would be, say, the fire department couldn't respond to a call. Was that
that we are ineffectively responding to a call, or we're not putting enough resources for our safety. We're pulling resources from another call, say a structure fire, and we have a heart attack, and we have to send a crew from that structure fire, exposing the people at that structure fire to more dangerous situation for lack of help out there. You know, we do the best we can to cover all calls, and it gets we're very busy. We run a lot of calls for the size of department we are. So working with Janine, we really discussed the minimum staffing level of 10, and we bumped that up to 11. And that 11th guy minimum on shift, even though that comes at a cost, it really helps us out staffing. So there's been some more expense to the city, but I think it's justified and warranted just for covering our responsibility. It's improved a lot of our ability, just the difference of one guy, it's improved both our EMS and fire, and it helps the guys out, their whole morale, just having the help they need. I'm watching that. We are overspent in some areas, and overtime is one of them. So we're watching that staffing level decision that we made. The next thing I want to talk about is the provisional employee ambulance driver program that we started. We've been running it for about 3 years now, and we really target the transfers with this program. They have worked some special events, but 90% of their hours are spent working those transfers, whether they're driving. Mostly it's driving, but we have a few paramedics that come in and ride in the back for us. The program is very successful. It's really helped us out. It's preserves our capacity in town for fire response. Instead of having 2 firemen down in Denver, we have 2 firemen possibly here to respond on a structure fire, which, speaking of right now, we've got an ambulance heading to Fort Collins, and we had that structure fire. So it does help us a bunch. Analyzing the data, we had 2,523.25 hours of product from that cadre of people for an investment of $54,936.89. So we were very happy with those numbers. The next slide, please, Nancy. In my budget request, one of my requests was trying to hire some paramedics and expand our civilian driver program from where we call them in when we need them to bringing some people in to have assigned hours to help with our heavy traffic workload for EMS. And benefits for that is it would really help us out in staffing. It would be a similar investment in work product for what we're getting for the skills. It takes an awful lot of investment to bring a person at the firefighter rank up to the paramedic level. Just the level we require from EMT intermediate to jump to a paramedic is another 1,200 hours of clinicals and classroom. So being able to hire off the street those skills and blend in that assistance into our organization is the goal to not only, it's not like we won't, that they'll be doing something and we have free time now. It would open us up to be able to accomplish our business inspections at a much better rate, to get our firefighter work done as well as emergency calls, done at the same time. The program as laid out would put paramedics on duty, barring sick leave and when people are gone and can't be there, but which would be 2 slots at 7 days a week. So we feel like that would be a good pilot to launch this, evaluate it, see how it goes, develop it from there. So that's the request. If we can go to the next slide, Nancy. One of the things we're facing is, and I've wrote it up, and I thought it was 9, but I counted up, and we have 10 people that between surgeries, military leave, a baby leave, knee surgeries, hip replacements, one retirement. We have 10 people that we are going to be short over the next into November. Now they come and go. I don't expect all 10 to be out at once, but we're kind of facing an onslaught of staffing shortages just from bad timing for a lot of guys that have to get some stuff done. So whether it's surgery or not. So that's one of the if we could launch the pilot program, and then I asked Janine for one overhire on our FTEs to get us through this period with all of the leaves that we expect, the long-term leaves that we got coming up. So anyway, that's the last slide I have in the presentation, and I don't know if Janine has anything she wants to add. We've talked an awful lot about these situations, and I stand for any questions.
Council, I'll just wrap up by noting on that last slide, items A and C are really management decisions that we can make within the employee authorization and budget authorization that you all have given us. Part of the reason that I wanted to talk about them tonight, though, is to make you aware that we're trying a lot of creative ways to deal with the staffing situation in the fire department. So A, that Dan talked about, that increase in manning, starting shifts at 11 versus 10. We've been watching the staffing situation for years, but it really kind of came to a critical point in the fall. And so when Dan and I talked, that's when we said, okay, we're going to go ahead and start shifts at 11, because we really felt like, there's safety issues for our own staff, and also we want to be able to respond for the public. So when we made that decision, we knew it was a bit of a budget gamble. And so that's partly why I wanted to disclose that to you tonight. We looked at the budget, Dan and I, just last week, I think, Chief. Mm-hmm. And as Dan said, he has a couple line items that are overspent due to that management decision. But I think the bottom line, the total budget allocation for the fire department, will be within your authorization for this fiscal year that will end June 30th. So the gamble paid off. We got the help we needed. We spent up to, but not over what you allow us. With respect to item C, we often overhire. You'll recall Chief Stalder did that, talked about overhiring last night in the police department as well. What that means is there are, say, 42 authorized people in the fire department, authorized by you, the governing body, those positions. But we will temporarily overhire, or say hire that 43rd person with the recognition that we have an impending probably retirement or something like that, or someone's going to leave the service and bring it down to 42, and it's a temporary situation. So I just thought I should explain that a little bit more for some of our newer council members. A and C are within management discretion, so long as we don't permanently exceed your FTE authorization or your budget authorization. But there is some risk. But again, we're trying to manage the situation with the tools we have without coming and asking for a permanent budget change. Item B is being recommended for you in the budget that you're considering for adoption this year, and we would pilot that for roughly a year and then come back and tell you how it went, and possibly ask to make it permanent if it is successful the way the driver program has been.
Thank you. That answered probably some questions that you might have been about to get. So I appreciate it. We do have some hands coming up. I'll go in order. First up is Councilmember Gabriel, then I have the Vice Mayor. Councilmember Gabriel.
Thanks, Mayor. Chief Dan, we've talked about this in the past. And by the way, I recently talked to one of your firefighters that will have surgery in the upcoming months. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Tough situation there. But I know in the past you lost several firefighters to Colorado because of wages. And I was wondering if that had stabilized over the years, that we could compete a little bit better with some of the Colorado fire departments.
Yeah, Councilor Gabriel, Honorable Mayor, that has stabilized at this point. The departures I've seen have been what I call normal retirement type departures. We had one guy transfer within the city in the last 2 months, and but it's more of a normal rate of turnover in our department now. It ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's kind of stagnant and there's not much movement. Other times it's like the gates are open, and we certainly did go through an unexpected period. I think it was 2015, 16, something like that, and we lost 8 people in a year. So, but we're recovered from that, and but shortages still happen. The shortages that we are anticipating this year, for the most part, are temporary in nature as far as for surgeries and whatnot. We do have some longer military leave commitments that were coming up, and so we do have 2 people I'm aware of that are out till probably November. So based on their personal situation, so so it affects us, but we're better than we were in those days. So
Thank you, Dan.
Glad you asked that question, Councilmember Gabriel. Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Really excited about the paramedic plan program, and would sure like an update, or basically an update when there's a little more data and a timely, when we can, council can kind of share in some of the, or learn about some of that. So maybe we could add it to our work session list, for 2023, or or now. I'm not sure, but it would be nice to know more.
Honorable Mayor, Councilor Pierce, I'd be very happy to appear before the council and update as requested any data we collect. We're really basing the hours, the number, a lot of things off of data, our frequency of call during certain times of the day, certain days of the week, our busy time with events. So we're really looking at the whole picture and looking at the workload for the firefighters and trying to blend that in to have the assistance to get the workload done that we face on a monthly basis. So I'd be very happy to do that.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief Johnson, do we get any reimbursement for, or maybe it's not an issue for all the students and student housing, that kind of stuff? You said you do UW athletics, but what about students in the dorms and student housing?
Councilor O'Doherty, Honorable Mayor, if I understand the question right, is it for running, like doing inspections, or I'm not sure what you're at.
I just meant emergency calls, things like that. Maybe it's not significant, but
our reimbursement from the university is strictly through an agreement on providing EMS assistance on their athletic events through their athletic department. We do not receive any other reimbursements from the university, but students do run through if they're ambulance calls that we're responding on, they go through the IMH billing process, and that revenue would be captured back to the city through the lease agreement with IMH. So, but there's no payment from the university outside of the athletic agreement that we have.
thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. I think that question, Chief, that's come up in some discussions before, but we're wondering what percentage of calls, and I think you've shown us that before, but it might have changed, the percentage of calls that are campus related. I think that's something we always want to take a look at, but get into that more at another time. See, we've got Councilmember Schuster here. Thank you.
Thank you. I was looking at your amount of calls for this year and divided it out by the year. So I see you're getting almost 13 calls a day on average. And I'm sure that some days, weekends, stuff like that are probably worse. We have a college graduation come up here, and I know we get a lot of summer tourists, so I'm sure maybe they fill in for it. Do our calls go down during the summertime, or are they just as aggressive then as they are any other day?
Councilor Schuster, Honorable Mayor, our call load is pretty consistent through the year. We have busy days. There's not too many down days, I will say. You know, if you get a down day where there's only a few calls, you know you're going to pay dearly for it later to get that average. You know, it's like where you have a day where you might only have 3 or 4 calls, there's nothing to smile about because you're going to walk in on shift and have that day where you have 26 calls. So, and that does happen. So that's the tough thing about the projecting the staffing levels is to handle the workload on the emergency calls. And we can be stressed real on a quick basis, you know, for staffing levels. So I would say, to answer your question, I would say that we're consistently busy throughout the year. Summertime, a lot of stuff's going on. Fall, students come back. We're just busy year round. So.
And I'm sure Laramie Jubilee days are no picnic either.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I've heard everybody I've ever known that worked in emergency services of any kind say that they always hated it when there was a slow period because the pain was going to come later. Any other questions for Chief Johnson? Well, some of the questions that have been asked, you know, are questions I think we're always curious about. It's what's driving those call volumes, when is it busy, and things like that. So we appreciate this opportunity to get that information from you, Chief. I don't know where we want to head next with this. I want to make sure that everyone's had a good opportunity. City Manager, we appreciate that kind of management budgetary kind of overview for this part of it, and I think the council understands pretty well the need for that flexibility of sort of the extra person, because they're not really extra. What they are is sort of, to use a metaphor, they're kind of like the relief pitcher, and you don't really not want to ever be without them because you don't know when you're going to need them. It could be right away, and it could be for a while. And then it could be the case that pretty soon they're on the regular roster and we need to take a look at another relief pitching position because they've taken someone's place because of a retirement for one reason or another, or perhaps somebody's moved. I am really happy to hear that we're not seeing the same exodus of people to nearby municipalities, because that was a concern for a while. So I'm really glad to hear we've kind of caught up there. Well, what is the next portion of our work session then, folks, that you'd like to move us on to?
Mayor, we will move. This really wraps up the general fund portion of the budget. I wanted to just kind of end, thank the chief for being here, and end on page 46, just looking at personnel overall and what we will be recommending for staff adjustments. I mentioned this last night, but we did kind of run short on time, and I went quickly over it. So let me note, getting you a page number reference. Oh, it's not page 46. Let me just talk about what I am recommending overall in the general fund, and this will mirror in our enterprise funds, which we will move to next for staff compensation for the upcoming year. So I am recommending overall for staff an adjustment. The way we usually handle cost of living or merit adjustments is we'll recommend a pool of money to you within the budget that you then can approve. And if it is approved, then we will parse those funds out to staff throughout the year at whatever date we determine to implement that. So sorry, let me get you a page number reference here, and I've got to close a couple of screens to get to the page I need to be on.
No problem. While you're doing that, if he's still on there, Chief Johnson, again, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. It's good to see you. Good to hear from your department. I don't know if you were on your way out or not. I saw you turn off your camera. Just wanted to say thanks. We really appreciate it, especially making time to be here for 2 nights when maybe you thought you were going to be here last night. So we do.
Thank you for your support. So,
all right. It's good to see you. Take care.
So, Council, we were going to move next to the Water Fund, and our Public Works folks will join us for that. But wrapping up General Fund, let me say that what I'm recommending for compensation increases in the first year of fiscal 23 of our biennium is a 3% cost of living pot of funds that would potentially become effective and be doled out to staff in the summer of 22, just a few months out, assuming you approve that. That adjustment being for benefited employees, and particularly those that are not covered by the collective bargaining agreement, which is our fire union. The reason for that, as you know, is that the collective bargaining unit does bargain every year, and you just approved their collective bargaining agreement that included cost of living adjustments for them. So this 3% would not be in addition to what you just approved for fire employees. And then for decisions about compensation adjustments in fiscal 24, the second year of the biennium, what I'm recommending is that we defer those until next year's budget planning cycle. We will complete that staffing and compensation study this year, and that will really help to inform us about what adjustments to compensation we might need to make in 24. First of all, just to remain current with the market, with our competing employers around us, and that is the data that we will get from that compensation study. But in addition, we'll be 12 months further into the economic situation, and as you know, we're seeing some inflation, not just in prices for like piping and capital projects, but we're seeing wage inflation as well, so that people's wages really keep up with some of that inflation. So I think we'll be in a better position to make those decisions next year, and I am recommending that across the board for all staff, including general fund, and like I said, also our enterprise fund employees that we'll talk about next. If you have any questions about that, now would be the time. And then we'll get our folks in Public Works ready to help us walk through the water and the wastewater and solid waste funds.
We have a question from Councilor Schmeckel.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious about salary compression issues, like what we're seeing at the university across many departments. What is your sense of what we have here on city employees, and is that a concern we need to be addressing?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, Councilmember Schmeckel, through you, Mayor. Compression is something that I have to tell you that we are always dealing with here at the city. And as I think you probably recognize, when we're seeing inflation like we are, we're seeing, for instance, employers like the University of Wyoming increasing salary, that can really exacerbate compression issues within our own pay plan. So one thing that we always do, we always evaluate every pay band when we bring in a new person or when we promote somebody into that pay band. We'll take a look at the whole pay band to make sure that we don't have, say, more senior employees with more years of service who become compressed and suddenly find that, you know, we've brought in a new employee at a high rate because the market demanded it, and that more senior employee is making, you know, just a little bit more per year than that person. We'll make adjustments across the band if we see disequity like that. We also evaluate those pay bands for gender equity when we do that. As well as seniority. So that's something we really have tried to stay on top of for the last probably 5 years, Councilmember Schmeckel, since we last did a compensation study, because we realized in receiving the results of our last compensation study and then subsequently applying them that we needed to be more proactive to keep compression at bay and keep our people happy and keep them able to retain and wanting to retain their employment with us. Because the cost of hiring in new people is often way higher, not just in dollar terms, but in loss of expertise, loss of history, loss of productivity. So,
Perfect.
So when we do the compensation study this year, Fred, we will also be addressing that, and that's part of what it will look at. We'll measure ourselves against competing area employers, and then we'll also take a look at compression as a secondary issue, and where we see it, we'll make equity adjustments along with compensatory market-based adjustments.
Perfect. Thank you for the answer, and thank you for the efforts.
Great question. Thank you. All right. Other questions on that topic that the city manager has invited us to make right now before we move forward with the next piece? Any questions on these recommendations? Again, city manager, I think you've pretty well laid out the justifications and the reasoning for that for us as we go along. So I think folks are okay. So maybe we'll just go ahead and move forward.
All right, thank you. We'll continue to monitor wages closely this year. It is an issue for the city, and I'll share just briefly with you to wrap up this conversation. Our Health Insurance Committee met today. We're a self-insured entity, and we have a self-insured committee that helps along with our benefit administrator manager to manage that health insurance that the city has. And we are expecting some very significant usage of our plan. I think a lot of plans are seeing this after the pandemic. People are engaging in medical care procedures they may have put off or were unavailable during the pandemic. So we have a lot of utilization right now in our plan. We also have some pretty severe claims, and it looks like it's very likely that we will be seeing premiums go up for our staff in this biennium. We'll know a little bit more here in a few months, but we have that going on, and then the inflation factors that staff are dealing with. So it's going to be important that we keep our compensation as current and as competitive as we can with the labor market the way it is right now. So I'll bring you more information as that develops and we know more.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have with us tonight, you know from last night, our Public Works Director is away from the office this week. So we have a number of folks who will be assisting us as we talk about water fund supplemental requests. I'm going to start off on page 94 of your booklet, just with some background information on the water fund and its current financial position. And then when we get to those supplemental requests, I'll ask relevant staff members to help walk us through those. Council, just to orient you to where we are in terms of rate changes for water services, in December of 21, you did authorize 2 successive years of rate changes. 4% became a 4% change in revenue becoming effective this year, and then next year a 3.75% revenue adjustment becoming effective per your authorization. While those are current and active rate increases, remember we did not change or increase water rates for a number of years prior to these 2 rate changes that we put into effect. And speaking of inflation and speaking of the increase in pricing we're seeing for capital projects, I think it's very good, frankly, that we did go ahead and make these 2 rate adjustments in this current year and for next year. So the difference with the water fund, the wastewater fund, and the solid waste fund, as you know, is they are enterprise funds, and you do control revenue generation in order to cover the costs of these services, unlike in the general fund, which we spoke about previously last night and earlier this evening. If you look at the top of page 94, you can see a nice little bar chart, very simple, that shows you the revenue trend and what the revenues in the water fund are comprised of. And it's no surprise to you, I'm sure, that that light blue bottom part of each of those columns going back to fiscal year 2012 are your water charges, or the fees users pay to basically take water from our system. There are some other miscellaneous revenues that you can see there, but the lion's share come directly from the users of the system. So in that way, the enterprise funds, water fund included, are a lot like a business. The only difference is that we have to cover the cost of our service fully through charges and grants and loans and other means. We do not have to make a profit, however, we just have to break even. On the expenditure side, at the bottom of page 94, you can see what do we spend those charges on. And of course, what we spend them on in water is we spend them on keeping up the system, expanding the system, and making sure that it operates absolutely reliably, just like the fire department, right? When people turn on the tap, water comes and it's clean and healthy and safe. So that large peaking brown bar is really where the bulk of money is spent here. And then personnel being the sort of third highest spending category after debt service, or excuse me, after, again, capital project transfers in the blue column. So the cost that we pay for people in this section is rather small compared to what we spend on maintaining the system. Moving to the next page, page 95, you can see at the top left-hand column the fund balance trends. Our fund balance has been very healthy. We try to keep it, and it has been hovering around 5 to 6 months for about the last 5 years. I wanted to mention this just briefly because in past years there have been occasions when members of the public may say, geez, look at that. You have 5 to 6 months of reserve built up. That's too much. Why don't you spend that instead of increasing our rates? And the reason I wanted to take a moment to talk about this is the reason that we carry a reserve around that level here is, in fact, to flatten out the rate. In other words, we don't have to charge more when we have a significant high capital project, a high cost project, say like the North Side Tank, which is going to be well over $15 million. We don't have to raise the rate to pay for that and then maybe lower the rate. This fund balance helps to smooth out the rate so it can stay consistent. So there are times when we're building up fund balance in order to pay for high dollar projects that are coming down the pike in future years.
I really think that's a really key point, because that is something that you do get questions about, or at least used to get questions about pretty regularly. And I really appreciate that. I think that's probably the key takeaway for people. I don't know how we could put it, how we could message that any clearer for folks out there, but keeping a lot of reserve balance, sort of this piggy bank, if you will, is insurance against having to say, well, folks, we had a bunch of work we had to do, so we're really going to hit you with a big rate increase now. I mean, those are the two choices. And it seems like it makes more sense to have money in the reserves. So always good to spend time on that question and in that discussion, City Manager. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, know that when our rate consultants do take a look at all of the financial information and recommend rate changes to you, they're taking into account the fund balance. And so that's a really important tool that we have to smooth out rates, and they work with us to make sure that that's part of the accounting. So we can go to the next page.
It's a question for Councilor O'Doherty. Yeah. Go for it.
Thank you. Isn't that also factored into our bonding, that our reserve? Isn't that a factor that helps calculate what people are willing to pay for our bonds?
Yeah, I think Councilor O'Doherty, through you, Mayor, that's a great point. This does contribute to our bond rating, and if Jennifer or Malia would like to weigh in further, they're really the experts on that. But clearly, it's going to show that we're well managed, we're a financially healthy utility, and going to get you a better loan and better loan rates. Malia?
I just wanted to mention that really it's based on our 10-year financial plan. So we're loading in everything that's financially cash flows, everything, debt, our operating, our capital, our equipment, everything is being forecasted for those years when the rate analysis is coming in. So, there's dips in those years, there's pluses in those years, and that cash flow does have, it's not just a reserve, it's also how much we have to have in cash to actually manage the business for the next few years through this rate study. And yes, having good financials and long-term planning definitely helps our bond rating. So hopefully that answers. Thank you, Council.
Another good point to spend time on. That bond rating is pretty important because there are projects that just require it. They're not going to be able to be funded any other way. And I think we want to keep that bond capacity. And City Manager, I understand this, only as high as we have to. Right? I mean, it's just like anybody else. You don't want to borrow or bond out, so to speak, any more than is required by the projects that we have going. Right? You're not bonding so you have reserves. You're keeping reserves so you don't have to bond. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
So looking at other revenue, yes, and I agree with what you said. If we go to page 96, you can kind of see a description and narrative of all of the major revenue sources that contribute to all of those significant capital projects, new and maintenance. in this fund. Charges for services have been mentioned, but I wanted to give a nod to SLIB and to the Wyoming Water Development Commission. We have been very successful in seeking grants and loans through the State Lands and Investment or Loan and Investment Board and the Wyoming Water Development Commission over the years. These are powerful tools. SLIB administers what they call the State Revolving Fund, which is actually federal money through EPA that the state administers, and that is a really powerful program for drinking water and for clean water that we've been really successful in getting grants and somewhat low interest loans for as well, or principal forgiveness loans. We have on that right-hand column under federal infrastructure funding some new opportunities, as you know. The city received the first installment of the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act monies, and that was $4 million, which is about, $4 million so far, 71% of that amount was allocated to water and to wastewater lines over in the sewer side of the utility fund. We will be submitting application for additional ARPA funding through the state of Wyoming, and you know that in the last budget session concluded of the Wyoming legislature just about a month ago, they did have about $334 million appropriated in ARPA funding for a number of eligible programs. In addition to that, they appropriated about $50 million for local government support projects to SLIB, and then another $50 million for water and sewer projects. So we're very hopeful that that federal pass-through money will continue to be available through SLIB, through ARPA as well. And then I've mentioned it before, but we are monitoring the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and hoping that that will be a source of potential revenue for the Water Fund in future months and years. The budget team noted here that the distribution of that Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act is intended to spread over a number of fiscal years, federal fiscal years 22 through 26. So this could be something that we see for a couple bienniums out, not just the biennium that we're looking at this evening. And then I think the last thing I wanted to show you or talk about quickly on page 97 in terms of general information dovetails off of this conversation about grants and loans. And you'll see the chart at the very bottom of the page is the capital project revenue, showing all of the sources that we have allocated or intend to allocate in the upcoming budget biennium. And for instance, Northside Tank, you can see there's, 6, 7 lines there where we've cobbled together various funding lines to accomplish that project. So that's where you would find out where we have grants, where we have loans, and where we intend to seek a grant or loan. For instance, looking at the Water Master Plan, we're identifying the American Recovery Act, hoping for an 85% grant passed through from the state for $1.7 million, forecasting that if we're successful, we'll have that revenue coming in fiscal 23, the first year of the biennium. Okay, and that's kind of the overview information. On the next page, I'd point out there are adjustments recommended within the Water Fund relative to the prospective Bath Ranch operations. If we're successful in closing and acquiring that property here in about 30 to 45 days, the budget team have gone ahead and put in funding to help with the acquisition of that property this year. On page 99, the bottom of the page, you'll see the summary of all of the Water Fund expenditures with actuals shown for the past 2 years, and then the budget projected out as it's being recommended to you for fiscal 23 and 24. That chart covers 2 pages, and if you scroll on to page 100, you'll see the total amount at the bottom for fiscal 23. The total recommended budget is $48,111,717, and for fiscal 24, total recommended budget is $20,241,920. The pie chart will show you how those recommended expenditures break out by type, And as I said earlier, the gray kind of huge piece of that pie is capital projects and equipment and some studies, notably the updating of the water master plan, that 170,000 I just spoke of. So let's look at operations and maintenance on the next page. And there are a handful of supplemental requests, but not very many, frankly, compared to the general fund that we looked at last night. We're starting off with the Water Administration Cost Center. And in that section, there are 3 budget supplemental or additional requests. And I'm not sure who on staff wants to cover those. Was Malia, were you going to handle talking through these? They're pretty straightforward. Malia mentioned last night the budgetary changes to recognize our Municipal Operations Center coming online in this upcoming fiscal year.
Janine, I think Paul Beckett is here to speak on the water and wastewater.
Fantastic.
Great.
I'll wait for Paul. Looking for him.
Hello.
Hi, Paul. Oh, you do have a camera down there. Nice.
Yes.
Good to see you. Well, so with that, I think I'll just let you walk through these. And if there's any that you would like to pull in other staff members, please feel free. Or if you'd like to pull me in, you could certainly do that also.
Okay, yeah. The request to cover the water funds portion for the is to run fiber internet connection out to the Municipal Operations Center. That's just for fiber and computer use out there. And the requests, yeah, and I'm not sure about the ranch operations, Janine. I'm not sure if Darren's on board for that or.
Paul, you can skip those. I'll come back and handle those.
Okay. Are we down to personnel requests at Water Admin?
Sure, you can go over those. That'd be great, Paul.
Okay.
I should have introduced you, by the way, to Council. Paul's our operations superintendent for the water function.
Yeah, so the increase for the Public Works Division for the professional staff is just to cover the front desk and answer phones and provide administrative support out there. And I think that's a shared cost amongst the entire Public Works Division. And I'm not sure where we're headed next, Janine. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. I think you covered them all. Like I said, there's not really a lot to cover here, Council. Yeah. So, yeah, the water fund has very little in it, but I'll go back up and fill in on the ranch operations and water rights on page 101. I mentioned that there are a lot of requests related to the Bath Ranch, and you can see those grouped up here where it says electric, gas, building repair, road materials, chemicals. Those are fairly small additions to the budget, but they'll give us some operating expenses to handle Bath Ranch operations if we acquire that property. Also fence repairs and then other improvements. The high dollar item that you see there, it would actually be the lease payment, an actual sort of mortgage payment, so to speak, on the ranch, assuming that we close on that. And then under water rights, the last section at the bottom of that chart on page 101, again, this pertains to the Bath Ranch. We have rentals and leases, legal, tools and shop supplies, irrigation materials, and electrical. And these would all be supporting ongoing just operations and maintenance out at that site if it comes into our land inventory, and also a $10,000 horticultural request. Now, this is not related to the Bath Ranch. This is, in fact, related to the Monolith Ranch, and we do have to periodically replant or reseed the alfalfa meadow at the Monolith Ranch. I think it's every 10 years is the cycle that we're on, and it's been now that long ago, and we have to reseed in the upcoming summer for the pivot area. And then I'll scroll down to the personnel requests on the next page. There was under ranch operations, we would like to increase the part-time budget, and this is just money that we have to hire part-time seasonal staff. This is in order to support seasonal irrigation at the ranch properties, and that's an amount of $26,000. We typically hire one seasonal irrigator. I did authorize Darren to go ahead and hire 2 this summer because with the bringing on of the Bath Ranch, we're bringing on more work, literally, and so we need more people to complete that work for us. And I think that is pretty much the water fund. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. I did skip over the top of page 100, those centrally budgeted adjustments, because these are just routine ongoing expenses, like when postage stamps cost more and we have to raise our budget to accommodate that, or when oil natural gas prices go up, or electricity. So they're really things that we don't have much say over. We just have to adjust and absorb as a matter of the cost of doing business. Okay. I do not see any questions, so while you're all contemplating and looking, I'll let you know that would be the end of water, and we would move over to the wastewater fund on page 106 if there are no questions. And Paul, thank you for your help. Okay, so I will go to page 106, and this is the wastewater side of our utility fund. Also, one of the 3 enterprise funds that the city has. You can see at the top of page 106 there, the biennium budget as far as other enterprise funds, and then the wastewater fund as a portion of that. It's about 34% of our enterprise activities. On the bottom of page 106, there's the beginning of a discussion about where is the financial position of the wastewater fund overall. Noted here, as with the water fund, we did engage our rate consultant to do that 10-year cost of service analysis, and based on that information provided by staff, the cost of providing sewer services was broken down and rate adjustments approved by the council in December of 21, with 4% rate adjustment going into effect this year and another 4% rate revenue adjustment, going into effect in 2023. For both the water and wastewater fund, we probably won't evaluate rates again in this biennium that we're looking at, the 23-4 biennium, but we will the biennium after that, which would be 25-26. So looking down the page in the left-hand column, like with the water fund, you can see the composition of the wastewater revenue, and it is similar in the fact that charges for services, the bottom blue shaded portions of the column really are where the lion's share of revenue comes from to support the wastewater operations. I should have mentioned in water, but I'll mention it here because it's the same for both. Specific purpose tax in 2010 was a significant source of revenue toward the water fund, and also here in the wastewater fund with about $6 million approved by the voters for sanitary sewer line work. In the next column, we can move from revenue to expenditure, and you'll see the bar chart at the top half of the page, right-hand column. And this is looking back since 2012. And like with the water fund, that the brown line is really the most high dollar category where we spend money coming in from those revenues, and that is no surprise, capital projects and equipment. And then the fund balance trend is depicted at the bottom of page 107 in the right-hand column. Like with the water fund, the reserve just doesn't build up. It's generated from really long-term rate planning and then allocated out to those capital projects, and helps us to control rate changes or increases over time. The reserve here is in compliance with our policy to retain 3 to 6 months. And you can see right now at the end of fiscal 21, the most current period that we've looked at, there's 4.6 months there.
City Manager, when we talk about
yeah.
when we talk about reserve for 4.6 months, what do we mean? Like, what does a month of reserves represent? Just sort of in a general way. The total cost of operating that enterprise fund, is that what we're referring to?
Malia and Jen can give you the actual definition, but we do, I believe it covers all of our operating expenses and debt service. And they'll correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, City Manager, it is the budget for that fund broken out by month is how that would work. So you are correct.
I just thought that would be a useful thing to kind of to cover, you know, that's what a month of reserves represents. So if you think about 4.6 months and what we could potentially cover with 4.6 months, it's not, frankly, it's not a tremendous amount, right? City Manager, to me, it seems like that could go pretty quick if for some reason that were to be taken out. And I see that we've got Jen, go ahead.
Honorable Mayor, thanks. I do want to acknowledge that we do include capital in this projection because we realize that there can be capital needs that arise during a year that are unplanned for in the form of emergencies. And so we really try to make this be a number that represents to the public and to the council our coverage for not only operating, but emergencies that might arise too.
I think it's good to cover that information for folks that might take a look at these meetings and our discussions. Yes, Councilmember O'Doherty.
So do those emergencies include when there's a sewer line break in an alley and the staff has to dig up the whole alley and replace a sewer line? Is that the kind of emergency that you're talking about? Thank you.
Honorable Mayor, through you, that is a good example of an emergency. One might also think of budget amendments as unplanned. And so this is not a purely like objective number, but it's more of a subjective measurement of what that level of reserve really looks like in terms of the operation.
And I would add there is, Councilor O'Doherty, there is funding in the operations and maintenance budget to deal with, you know, more routine emergency repairs. If that doesn't sound contradictory, but we expect for those things to happen. But there can be sort of unplanned, really large catastrophic things that certainly could happen. And this reserve is where we might be coming back to you and saying, hey, you know, the main transmission line has developed a failure and we need to correct it. And moving money from reserve. I'd remind you, you know, I mentioned last night that in June of 2020, the Recreation Center Fund reserve was down to, I believe, 1 month, because of the pandemic effect out there. So while our fund balance policy set by council, frankly, is a 3 to 6 months of expenditure reserve, it's a really important tool for us to have for unforeseen reasons. And 4.9 months or 4.6 months seems like a lot, but yeah, in general, 3 to 6 months is considered robust. But when you see the scale and cost of some of the projects, it does make you wonder.
Mr. Mayor, if I could follow up.
Yeah, if you have follow-up, go ahead. Yep.
Would this be a good time to remind us about the number of water and sewer line breaks? I believe there's been a reduction in the occurrence of those. Do you happen to have that number on your or roughly?
I'm going to try to look.
The past? Never mind, I can look it up elsewhere.
Well, you know what's City Manager, and you know what the general push of our questioning there is, because although I think the public perception of this has improved and there's been a greater understanding. When I say improved, I just mean that the general knowledge about about the way we fund these systems and why we've moved in the direction that we have over the last, I would say, 15 years or so. I think it's always good to have that visual for people to say, here's how it used to look with the amount of breaks that we had before we implemented the system that we try to use now for these infrastructure needs, and we have less breaks. So when people say, well, geez, the rates have really gone up since I first started living here or doing business here or whatever, I think it's always good to say, yep, and there's a very good reason for that, because we don't want to be in this situation and we don't want a water system failure, because that's really going to upset your household or your business or whatever. And I just think we can't get enough of that message getting out of there. And that's really what it is. There's never going to be a point when that isn't a relevant thing to talk about when we're talking about what we spend on water infrastructure. I guess that's the bottom line. And if we don't have that image handy, no problem, city manager. I see Councilmember O'Doherty agrees with me. I know the other members know that too, but yeah, it's just one of those things.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. And I was looking to see if I could lay my hands on the most recent data I have. I don't see it. If Superintendent Beckett or anybody else has it, they're welcome to share it. What I can tell you anecdotally is we still have dozens and dozens and dozens of breaks every year, but it is down significantly from what it was prior to making the significant investment the community has into our water system and wastewater system. If I remember right, we were up to well over 120 breaks a year in the water system, but that's been many, many years ago. We've made a good investment, and it's really paid off. Let's see if anyone turned their camera on. Paul did. Hi, Paul. Did you want to add something?
Yes, Honorable Mayor and Council. The investment we've made into the water and wastewater systems have helped tremendously. Like Janine noted, I think at our peak, we were around 120 water main breaks a year, 30 or 40 curb stop leaks, meter pit leaks, things like that. We're much more streamlined, around 50 to 60 a year over the past 7 or 8 years. It's been much easier to maintain. Also, we've been able to increase on equipment, mainly meaning sewer trucks. And so we've been able to get out and maintain the sewer lines more regularly, wash them on a more routine basis. That's really cut back on the backups, the grease buildup, the root intrusion. So we've seen significant improvements for sure. So,
well, I think that's really great to hear. And Paul, why we've got to always cover that for people, because people want to know, where's that money going? What am I paying for with that? And I think if you're talking about, you're paying for almost a 50% reduction in the kind of breaks that can really ruin people's day and eliminate the water that they're going to be, that's what people need to hear about, because Laramie gets a bad rep for having, the highest water rates in the state and so on and so forth. First of all, I don't think that's accurate. Second of all, that myth about Laramie's water rates has not gone away. That's still out there. You still hear people talk about how we've got the most expensive water rates and so on and so forth. And I think people want to know where that money's going. And I think that's the clearest way to illustrate it to them. It's going to making sure you have a reliable water system.
that's correct.
I just really appreciate that breakdown that you just gave us. We should send it out. We should send out that little graph with the utility bill every month.
Yeah, it's a pretty powerful graph, honestly.
Yeah, I agree.
I will kind of forge forward here, just to mention on the bottom of that page, we've noted the major revenue sources. And you'll see again, I mentioned charges for services, but you'll see the State Loan and Investment Board mentioned again under the clean water side of the revolving fund. We are also able to access grants and loans in this category for sewer projects. The ARPA money, as I said, went to that first allocation going to water and wastewater, and we will continue hoping for additional funding coming from those federal funding bills into this side of the utility fund. If you scroll down to page 110, the top table, like in the water fund, will show you all of the capital project related revenue broken down by type. I always think that's a useful chart to point out. And that's pretty much the end of the revenue section, and we're ready to talk about our expenditures starting on page 112. And here you see that entirety of the wastewater fund recommendation broken down by cost center and activity. And for fiscal 23, at the bottom of the page, you'll see the budget recommendation is $32,445,895 in the first year of the biennium, and $10,436,866 in total in the second year of the biennium. Those numbers are very different, as you know. One's very big, one looks a lot smaller, and that is that ebb and flow of capital expenditures with big projects hitting in certain years. On the next page, you can see those expenditures broken down by type. Gray is the lion's share, and that again is your capital projects. So as we look at O&M, operations is, let's see, mere percent. I'd say about 15% of the total costs within this fund. And for supplementals, we are recommending in the first year of the biennium, an increase in budget of $87,960, and in the second year, $67,960. Wastewater Administration, again, the Municipal Operations Center is opening. Paul mentioned the broadband, the electric utilities, and the natural gas on the water side, and that is the same and true again on the wastewater side. Each of our enterprise funds pays its proportionate share, just like the general fund does when we have shared facilities or shared overhead and administrative expenses. And then, Paul, I'll let you talk about the treatment supplemental for consulting and training.
Yes, Janine, Honorable Mayor and Council. So the treatment and consulting is I think it's just more for our SCADA systems. We're trying to upgrade SCADA support at our wastewater treatment plant. And
Paul, what's SCADA?
So SCADA, so all our controls out of our wastewater treatment plant are just controlled by a computer SCADA system, and it just it's all electronically controlled. And so we're looking for more support or different support on how to manage and update and keep that going. And so we increased some money to do that, and that's essentially all that is.
And is that system kind of an older one, or do we have to, periodically, get a new one in there so that we can get the support for it, or what? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's an ongoing system. It's not necessarily older. It's kind of a continually upgraded process. And right now we do it a lot in-house and in staff, and we're looking to get some outside support that can be updated more electronically through a third-party vendor.
I can tell you why I asked that question is when I've learned and heard from city staff about some of the water system stuff over the years. I remember one time we had to completely move to a new, I think it's automated system, because they weren't going to support the old software and electronics for the one that we had, so we had to completely get a new one. So I just wanted to, I guess, a little reassurance that wasn't on the way with that system also. So thank you for that.
Yes, no, we're not to that point yet, but we just continually upgrade to try to, to avoid that scenario, basically.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions for Paul on that one? No? Okay.
So, Council and Mayor, if you scroll down to the next page, you'll see the personnel recommendations. These are, again, similar. The first one being related to the Municipal Operations Center. There's some concern about staffing the counter, and so a little bit of funding to support that if it's necessary. Staff will kind of trial run the hours of operation in the public reception area over this next year, and we'll find the right fit of staffing and to serve that facility. Paul, did you want to talk about any of these other items?
I don't believe so, not unless there's a specific question.
Folks, anything on any of those items? Okay. Guess not.
So that is the wastewater side of your utility fund. Pretty quick and pretty easy. I promised you it'd be shorter tonight. There's no questions there. We're going to move next to solid waste.
Well, we want to thank Paul for hanging out for those questions, for sure.
Yes, thank you guys.
Solid waste fund. Oh, the other big, exciting, big ticket item. All right.
Absolutely. We have JR with us this evening. JR Slingerland is our solid waste manager. So thanks for being here, JR. I'm going to talk through some of the overview material, and then I'll pass off the supplemental requests to you. So starting, Council, on page 118, you can see kind of, and I've glossed over this as we've talked through the budgets, but for every section of the city, every department, every fund, we do acknowledge what accomplishments were made in the previous year toward council goals and management goals, and then we set forth what the objectives will be for the upcoming biennium. I didn't want to read to you, but that is all there if you'd like to read it for yourself. So moving to page 119, we do work with consultants on the solid waste fund as well to make sure that we have a really robust 10-year outlook for setting rates and planning capital projects. Currently, our tipping fee is $12. That is a significant increase from how the the landfill used to operate prior to all of the improvements that we've made out there, as you know. Those improvements have been really important, though. And if you look at the top of that page, you'll see the solid waste revenue trends. You can see how we've financed the operation of the center. This looks a little bit different than in the utility fund with water and sewer. You'll see that collection charges, disposal charges, and diversion charges are a lot smaller in total than would have been your user fees over in the utility fund. The landfill dump fees in the yellow, they're a fairly significant piece. This is the gate fee that people pay in addition to those first three charges I mentioned that we receive on our bills each month. I'm going to move. There's some history here for those of you that are new to council about the changes that have been made, which are really monumental, frankly, over the last, say, 5 to 8 years. But I'm not going to go over that, and instead maybe just focus on the next page, which is the trends for expenditure, looking back from 2012 to 21.
City manager.
Again, yes.
I do think, to be fair, I'll try to give which is unusual for me, the very quickest version of that. Some federally mandated changes to the way landfills need to be operated hit the state of Wyoming. Lots of municipalities and towns had to change things around. We put in a new system with lined pits and things of that nature. Considerable cost, required an increase in those fees, is probably a better system. Undoubtedly, it's a better system than the one that we used to have. It's more environmentally sound and so forth. It wasn't free, and it wasn't funded outside of what we could do for ourselves. And so I think that's one of the biggest drivers behind those changes. Thank you, City Manager. I'm sorry. I do think that's probably worth going over.
Thank you, Mayor. Agreed. Really monumental what's changed. It wasn't too long ago that we didn't even have electricity at this site. So now we have line cells and scales and, wow, electricity and plumbing, plumbed toilets, right, JR? That's a big notable change. Expenditure trend on the top of page 120, you'll see, like in the utility fund, the capital projects and large equipment out there really are one of the significant cost drivers. The personnel blue line you'll see has remained really steady, and we haven't increased personnel out at the facility in a number of years. Fund balance trend is also shown on this page. As of the end of 21, we have 4.5 months, which is within the council's 3 to 6 month policy. This has the same effect as in the utility fund to help stabilize rates, help us in the event of an emergency to continue the operation of the the solid waste and landfilling operation in perpetuity, really. And then as you look to page 121, there is again a description of where all of the major revenues come from in addition to our charges for services. And you'll note that the State Loan and Investment Board, again, through the SRF loan and grant program through the feds, is an important pass-through agency managing funds that we're able to use in select circumstances for solid waste facilities. Going to revenue by type on the next page, 122. Charges for services in orange in that pie chart are really, this is how we pay for this operation. It's what we, you, I, all of us pay on our bills and at the landfill, and that is really the lion's share of how we're able to operate this service for the community. And again, it is a perpetual obligation. Once we put that waste in the ground, even if the city were to maybe privatize, we would always have responsibilities for monitoring that site.
Councilor Doherty has a question.
So here I am with the glass again. I'm really excited to have glass recycling and appreciate what JR and his team have put together. But I know that when it was being done by the conservation group, that they could take they could take donations. And what I understand from Councilor Harrington, since his brother was doing this, that they covered their costs. And I think there are people in Laramie that would be happy to donate when they drop off glass. So I'm wondering if that's a possibility of having like people go to the landfill, and if they're willing to donate because they're so happy that we have this service and they don't want it to go away. Is there a way that we can do that and not mess up the books? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, Councilor O'Doherty, that's a great question. I'm going to maybe see, I think what I'd like to do is look into that. I think it is possible, but I'd like to talk to our accounting folks and understand how we would handle that. And I did see, JR, you turned your mic on. Maybe if you want to add anything, please do.
Yeah, currently the program is free of charge. It's a break-even program. The glass that we send down to Denver currently, we get reimbursed for the transportation. So it's break-even, and it's looking good for now. We've sent off one load, I think it was at the end of last year, beginning of this year. And we're getting ready to send off another load. So it's kind of a program that's in infancy. It's working good now, but I think we need a little more data to see where we need to go.
Mr. Singleton, I don't need to tell you, do I, how popular and how well received that glass recycling issue is. You know, people are going to want to recycle glass in Laramie, so they were so happy to see that. And I think Councilmember O'Doherty's right. I think it's so important that if they felt like there was a way they could financially contribute to keep it going, they would do that. Many people would do that. But it's good to hear that. It's good to hear that right now it's break even and doing well. I don't know, City Manager. Maybe, you know, I think that still warrants a little bit of investigation. People that are so interested in these recycling programs that they want to be able to contribute to their long-term financial stability. It's probably worth looking into. Glad to hear that it's you know, cost neutral right now, though. That's huge. I mean, that was one of the reasons that it took us a while to figure out how to do that program. So we really appreciate all of that research and effort out there from the Solid Waste Department, Public Works.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will. I'll talk with Jennifer and Malia, and we'll try to understand what a sort of almost like a blue sky-esque kind of program for solid waste and recycling would look like. Just to remind you, on page 123, the same cost of living adjustment recommended for employees in the solid waste fund as in all of the other funds. That's at 3% COLA effective this summer with your approval. And then on the next page, 124, you can see the entirety of the solid waste fund recommended budget for the upcoming biennium. In 23, total cost would be $9,184,830, and then down slightly in the next year at $7.2 million recommended for this fund and its operations. If we go to the next page, there are 3 supplemental requests grouped together, and the first three grouped under Solid Waste Administration are what you've been hearing over and over again, just modifying our budgets to acknowledge the bringing on of the Municipal Operations Center and Solid Waste Fund paying its share of broadband and utilities. Then I'm going to let J.R. Slingerland talk to you about the other two, and then also about the personnel requests on the next page.
Okay. Honorable Mayor, council members. So for disposal, we have security cameras. We currently do have some cameras out there, but they're getting pretty old. We do have failures every so often. By getting some new security cameras, we can actually tie it into the waste tracking software. So that it could actually take a picture of it, tie it to the ticket. So if a business is using an account out there and they dispute a charge, we can look it up. We can show them the picture. Is this your truck? And that pretty much decides it at that point. Somebody may be trying to use their account, and then we'll have the picture of the person who is trying to use the account. And also for safety purposes, to have the cameras out there to see what's going on at night when the facility's closed down and all that good stuff. And then under recycling, we have McBride's contract elimination. McBride's is the company that goes around town. They've got the curbside containers that citizens can go ahead and pay for, and they pick up the green waste. They bring it out to our composting facility, and we make compost out of that green waste. To get them started, we had a contract with them where we kind of subsidized their services. We're at the end of that contract, so you're seeing that amount removed. And then going down a little further, Janine had mentioned the personnel request. So for disposal, we have a part-time increase. This is kind of what was under the wastewater account to fund a front desk person. It's the same that we saw on that division. And then for our recycling, we would like to have an additional full-time employee, a recycling and diversion coordinator, to help us to improve and make our recycling and diversion programs even better out there at that landfill and recycling center. Currently, what we do is we use staff when they're able. They go and do the recycling stuff. For example, the refrigerators out there, they remove the Freon, and then the refrigerator actually gets sent off to a metal recycler. By having a full-time employee, they can make that their priority instead of a secondary duty. They could go and they can get those fridges knocked out of there, so the overall aesthetics of the facility look a lot better. They can help to improve our single stream recycling. I foresee them going along on the recycling truck and kind of doing some audits of the recycling carts to see what's there, what the contamination is. There's a lot that this program, this position could undertake to help improve our recycling and diversion programs.
Thank you, JR. Much appreciated. Council, I am recommending the additional FTE to you after reviewing it with solid waste folks. I think it is an important position, and we've sort of filled the gaps sort of willy-nilly with interns and, as JR said, staff as we're able, but there's a lot of interest, and frankly, I'll be honest with you, I think even in terms of public education, having a little more robust staffing to do that could be important. And boy, JR, I was out there last weekend. We have a lot of refrigerators. A lot of refrigerators. It's like a forest of refrigerators, things that I can't even believe still exist on the planet.
I think this is the kind of position that people want to see us adding into these programs and are supportive of. I've got Council Member O'Doherty here with a question.
Again. So thank you. I do think the recycling FTE is warranted. I hope that there is money in there for the education part of the recycling, because I know that at that symposium a few weeks ago, a university employee said, "Hey, I'm pretty conscientious about recycling, and I didn't know we could only recycle 1 and 2 if it has a screw top lid, 1 and 2 plastics." So we really have to get the word out. The recycling app is really helpful, but we need to get some more out. So I don't know if I need to look through there more carefully, or if you already have it in there, some more for education, maybe for literature or stickers. Thanks.
Yeah, we have people that are really enthusiastic about recycling, and then when they're putting that stuff that they think they know they can recycle in there, and then it's just adding to our whatever they call that, the throw out charges from our partners down there in Denver. They don't want to be doing that, right? That's the opposite of what they want to be doing. And I think it was kind of a surprise to people that only screw top lid plastics 1 and 2 were recyclable, because there's a lot of 1 and 2 plastics there. Frankly, I wish those folks, what are they called down there in Denver? Can't remember. They've come to talk to us several times anyway. I wish they were a little more flexible in some of that stuff, but we have to do what we have to do. So more public information dollars, probably a good idea. I don't know if that's part of this FTE's job, though. This kind of sounds more like focusing on the recycling items, making sure that the refrigerator forest is thinned. That kind of sounds like what we're doing with this position, not so much putting in money for outreach and education, city manager, but maybe there's an amendment brewing here. If we need to direct a few more dollars in that direction, I think the council would be supportive of it. Councilmember O'Doherty, your hand's still up.
Yeah.
Back me up on this topic, because I really agree with you.
I would like a recycling manager would have a better feel for what the incorrect stuff that's going in there, right? Don't you think, JR? Like, where do we need the education? Because people think that X is recyclable and it's not. So somebody that's keyed into it more might be able to educate us better about what needs to change for citizens. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Councilor O'Doherty, through Mayor. I do foresee this position taking on some educational roles, taking the lead of the recycling part when the school tours go out there. And as I kind of mentioned, riding along on the recycling truck to help figure out what the contamination is on there, and making some literature and different items to further educate people on the correct things that are there. Somebody to basically take the lead on it, and that's their main focus, is to get our recycling programs, improved and to make it a lot better for everyone.
Thank you for clarifying on that. I'm really glad to hear that. I wasn't sure what direction the emphasis would need to be, so that's really good to hear. Really good to hear. And of course, we're pretty enthusiastic about supporting that change.
Mayor and Council, I'll add for you. I've mentioned that I'm not really recommending any staff additions this year for full-time staff, except in this fund. This does seem to be a high priority. But I also want to draw your attention to just really the small size of this fund. If you look, I was just looking at the rough numbers. If you look at what's being recommended for fiscal 24, the total budget is $7.2 million. And of that $7.2 million, I think just under about 1.5 to 1.75 million is capital. So if you back that out, you can see that sort of the operations and maintenance part of this budget is in the high 5 millions, probably 5.7 million. The reason I'm going through that quick math is that this fund is small, and so it's price sensitive as far as adding costs, particularly ongoing costs. So my hope was, with this one position, go ahead and recommend it to you. I'm pleased to hear support for it. But we always are very price sensitive in this fund, because the addition of too much staff or too much expense can drive the rate, just because it's a pretty small operation dollar-wise. So we'll monitor how this goes, and when we get this person on board, and then we can certainly have an ongoing conversation in the second year of the biennium as to the effectiveness of the position. And I know JR will let me know if they need more help out there.
City manager, I think it's fair to say, based on my limited knowledge of it, but I've paid attention when we've talked about it, and we'll had folks come and talk to us about it. That contamination charge that we can get from contaminated recycling through our contract, that can be a little bit of a cost driver too. So I think if this helps us in that area, then it may justify itself pretty quickly. I hope so, anyway.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. JR, you think so too?
Yeah, I think it can definitely help on this, that contamination charge. You know, it's a direct charge for us. Basically, we're hauling garbage down to Denver. It's taking a long route to a landfill. And a lot of times too, that contamination and that percentage, that's taking up space that could be for actual recyclables on that trailer as it goes to Denver. So I foresee it helping out a lot.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of hoping that if all works out well, city manager, it might be almost a neutral cost there if it balances out some of those charges we're getting from, because if I remember right, they could be significant for our recycling program.
Yeah, very much so. So yeah, I think that's a very reasonable observation, and we would hope for that. Okay. That concludes our enterprise funds presentation, solid waste specifically. So if there are any other questions, let me know before we let JR go. And then we'll just share some information with you to close out the O&M budget review tonight, and I think we'll be done. Maybe everybody can go to bed early at 8, right?
Yeah. I don't see a lot of hands popping up. Ms. Singleton, we do want to say thanks a lot. You know, budget time is sometimes one of the only times we get to see some of our staff people. So thanks for taking time out of your evening to be here and answering questions for us. And we're really pleased with the work that you folks are doing out there. We are. And we're hearing it from the people in Laramie too. They really appreciate these efforts towards recycling, all of that stuff. They're happy about it. So thank you very much.
Good night. Thanks, JR. Okay, Council, so to wrap up tonight, Director Wade is going to walk us through next steps now that we've reviewed the O&M part of our budget.
Okay.
City Manager. So we are coming up, this was our last budget work session, and we are coming up on our final special meeting that allows the council to make motions to change the recommended budget. And so earlier this evening, right around the time that our meeting started, I sent out operating budget motion forms for your consideration. There's about a week turnaround time. The forms are very simple, but we are always happy to help you. If you have a motion that you're considering and you're having a hard time writing about it, it's a service that we've provided for a long time. So reach out to me, to Malia, to Janine, and get your budget motions in if you would like to have them considered at the special meeting on the 24th. Staff will have a couple motions related to the operating budget, but nothing large that I'm aware of at this time, but we will continue to scrub numbers to make sure we don't miss anything. Are there questions about budget motion forms in general?
Council Member O'Doherty has a question.
Not a question so much as I want to inform the newer counselors about the cascading effects of having a budget amendment. Because I think I learned that last time, that you tweak this one little thing and then this whole, so if you would just educate us a little about that. Thank you.
And I think that speaks to the director's offer to work with the budget staff if you have amendments that you'd like to make, because they're going to be able to tell you what those ripples may be, or how we might avoid bigger ripples than you might want to cause. On the other hand, I feel pretty confident in saying I don't think you're going to see a lot of rippling amendments out of the council. You didn't on the other item. I think we feel very cautious about those things. And just to make this point clear, perhaps if somebody watches this video later or the reporter watches it, it's not because we're not interested in driving policy or making changes to fund those policy changes. It's that what usually happens is we set goals in discussions around those issues, and then the staff incorporates that in the budget, so that by the time we get to this point in the process, we're not needing to amend budgets to fund like glass recycling or other changes that we want to make, carbon neutrality programs, or adding staff members. It's because we've talked about it 6 months ago or further back, and the staff has figured out how to implement that into the budget at this time. So there tends to be little need for budgetary changes. And I think that probably needs some, the 2 minutes I just spent explaining that as well. These things are incorporated into the budget through a policy discussion much earlier in the process. It's not a situation where we're saying, well, you know, Councilor Gabriel has this great idea, and we talked about it last year, and we still haven't done anything. So now we want to make a $500,000 budget amendment. That's not how our process works. Usually those things have been incorporated well before we get to this point in the discussion.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Weaver, for that clarification, and through you to Councilor O'Doherty. I think your point is a valid one. So regardless of any of those ripples, our offer stands to assist the council with whatever motions might be on their mind. And of course, that is not just grammatical. As Councilor O'Doherty said, it really is about funding, and we'll help you put those pieces together. So if something is on your mind, please do reach out to us.
Thank you very much, Director Wade. Or bring it up during the goal setting next year instead of trying to make a budget amendment this year, council members. All right. City Manager, where do we go from here?
I'll just follow up on what you said and point out that while I have not addressed them as part of this presentation, those council goals are memorialized in your budget workbook, not only in the beginning of the workbook on page like 8, 9, 10, I think, but then also woven throughout the fund budgets, we identify where a matter is a council goal. So for the public who might be listening, that is kind of embedded here, and even if I didn't cover it, I tend to focus more on the numbers because you guys know what the goals are because you adopted them. They're your goals. One last thing I wanted to mention, it has been a topic of discussion that the council chambers potentially, and I think this came up, was it yesterday or last week? I'm not sure. But we are making some modifications to the council chambers, or preparing to make some modifications in addition to the ones that we made early on in the pandemic. And it doesn't appear that we will need any kind of budget amendment to do that. So those are in progress. We think we can extend existing funds, particularly funds that were being not expended during the pandemic because, for instance, people were traveling for training and things to that nature. So don't think we'll need a budget amendment for that, but that is one thing in the back of my head as we're estimating costs. Maybe something comes forward. Other than that, I don't really know of any changes that are, you know, maybe important to you all, other than the chambers. And I do understand that there are certain things that we were hoping to do in order to make the chambers ready for a return to in-person meetings potentially in the next year. So.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. And it's nice to hear that we can use some carryover funds. That's always good. This has been a lot of information.
Thank you.
Yeah, City Manager, this has been a lot of information, but once again, the budget team has done a really good job of setting these presentations and work sessions up for us. The flow of it has really made sense, and under your direction, these meetings and the follow-ups have been very useful and helpful, City Manager. Better and better through these budget processes. So we just want to say thanks again. We appreciate it. City Clerk.
I was just turning my camera on, Mayor, for the City Council updates and comments.
Yes. Yes. Are there any updates or comments? Council members? Councilmember Schuster, do you have one for us? Oh, Vice Mayor's got her hand up first. Sorry. Then I'll go to you, Councilmember Schuster. Go ahead, Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Earlier this week, Monday night, we had a Planning Commission meeting. Just to let you know, there was a conditional use permit approved for some activities at Blodorn Lumber on 3rd Street. So based on what I understood and what we were able to see in the plans, it looks like some really good aesthetic changes will be occurring, which will be very nice. There was another conditional use permit approved related to a garage over on Riverside. It just needs to be a little bit bigger. And then they went to the Board of Adjustments and also approved that for a variance. So that was it.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Appreciate that. Councilmember Schuster, I think you had said you were trying to get my attention for your updates, right?
Yes, I was trying to find my Wyoming Territorial Park list. I went ahead and emailed that to our city clerk, and I was hoping she was then going to put it out to everyone else, but has the entire list of summer events. And right now that I'm really trying to find it on my computer, that is when I have the biggest problem with it. So
the city clerk has it for us now, Councilmember Schuster. So
okay, thank you.
Go ahead and take a look there.
A list of it. The other board I'm on, the Historic Railroad Depot, their meeting is tomorrow night. And Councilor Schmuckel will tell you that the Rifle Range Board is meeting right now as we are speaking. So this gives the baseball one I wanted to point out. That is our baseball team that performs here in town. I'm sure that Councilor Gabriel will want to go to that one. They're going to do a throwback game out there and have vintage uniforms when they play something. Someone else, I can't remember the other team they're playing. We're going to have live bands on the 23rd. We are going to have a monthly cruise night with cars that'll be out there. And then our normal one, holiday lights, our ghost tours for the month of October. Just a lot of things going on. Really glad how things are going out there. Their Cinco de Mayo event on the 5th of this month went over great. They were extremely happy with that. So just wanted to let you know we're out there, and it's a good group to work with. They are actually looking for some board members. If anybody's listening to this, they would want to consider. We can have 9. We are at 6 right now. So we are looking for some of that too. Thank you, Nancy, for putting that up, our city clerk.
Yeah, thank you, city clerk. And thank you, Councilmember Schuster, for the event list. That's kind of nice to see and have a lot of stuff going on out there. No way I would have been able to remember even half of it. So I think next up we've got Councilmember Gumby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Reporting on the Disabilities Advisory Board, will be meeting this Thursday. We have decided to participate this year in Pride Fest, and we will also participate in Freedom Has a Birthday as that proceeds. The Board of Health will be meeting later on this month. The Vice Mayor Pierce and I are progressing with our work related to the wastewater surveillance project. We'll be having a meeting with members from Public Works, from the water treatment plant, etc. And COVID numbers do continue to rise on the East Coast in New England, New York, New Jersey, Washington. You know, a number of our top officials in the country have contracted COVID. The recent Met Gala, that was a fundraiser for the Metropolitan Museum, wound up being a spreader event, and COVID has spread throughout some of the entertainment industry. So it's not over yet. And so what we're trying to do then is put together a way, a very simple way of alerting the community of where we stand. Are we COVID green, yellow, or red? Kind of like having a red flag day for fire danger and wind. So I would really like to extend an acknowledgement to Director Webb, Deputy Director Klein, to Paul Beckett, and to William Schott for their work in trying to bring this forward. It's much appreciated. The last announcement is that we are working with the Albany County Mental Health Advisory Board, which is a county appointed entity that were incorporated into the recommendations made by the Police Community Relations group that part of our recommendations. And we are formalizing the appointment of a member from City Council to sit on that board and to also sit on the Crisis Response Subcommittee. And I have been asked to be the first council representative to that, but we're formalizing it so that it becomes a permanent liaison position so that we can carry forward some of the goals and directions that came out of the committee. And so that's it on the reports. And may I make a comment now about the bird scooters?
Yeah, of course, Councilmember Cumby.
Now that the weather is nice, the bird scooters are populating all over the place. So I've had a number of complaints from constituents in Ward 2 about the scooters being left in the middle of the sidewalks and
The middle of the street.
in the middle of everywhere. And I've had two people comment that they think that this pickup and attending that was promised by the bird company is only occurring, you know, maybe once or twice a week. And I had the occasion to observe across the street from me, they had a party and 10 bird scooters showed up at the party, and 3 left and 7 stayed on the sidewalk for 4 days. On day 3, I called the bird scooter company after I had watched an individual who lives in the neighborhood and mobilizes via electric wheelchair have to leave the sidewalk, go into 15th Street and transport themselves 1 block in 15th Street and back up because those scooters had blocked the sidewalk. When I got no response from Bird, then I called the city manager's office. And of course, within an hour and a half, 2 hours, the scooters were gone. But there were 7 scooters blocking the sidewalk at Steel and South 15th Street for 4 days. And I just think that that's unacceptable. And that's not what was presented to us. And what was presented to us is that somebody would every night come collect them, and they are not doing that. And I think that we need to talk to them formally about following through on this. It's really a problem. And since this, I'm just noticing it blocking sidewalks and right of access everywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Cumby. And the Vice Mayor has had to hear about this same issue from me on a number of occasions. Maybe it's a Ward 2 issue. I'm not sure. I agree with all of those comments. And I'll tell you, I see that Councilmember Schmeckel has indicated it's an issue in his neighborhood, which overlaps very closely with parts of Ward 2. This is why this contract renewal will not be on the consent agenda when it comes up for renewal later this year, at the end of this year. This needs a broader discussion. And frankly, Councilmember Cumby, I agree with you. I don't think the contract is being fulfilled. I don't think the terms of the contract are being fulfilled. And what's really irritating about this is I want that program to be successful. That should be a cool program where people are using those scooters to get around and enjoying themselves. And it shouldn't be a program where we're irritated. But frankly, I've been irritated about it since the beginning of it. They're all over the place all the time. I don't think they're fulfilling the contract. And I'm just bandwagoning here because frankly, I have the same level of irritation with it. Councilmember Somerville, thank you for waiting.
Thanks, Mayor. You know, I'll just make a comment on the bird scooter stuff. As annoying as it is to have it laying around, I hope we can clean that up with the company, because what I have seen is that they're being highly utilized, and they seem to be a very important addition to our community for transit for a variety of our residents. So I'll leave that there. Mayor, I only had one update, was on the downtown. Just want to give a shout out and have everybody send positive thoughts and cross your fingers. The Main Street group has traveled to the East Coast, and we'll find out on Monday if they are the winners of one of the great American Main Street in the United States. So they are a semifinalist, but they'll find out on Monday, and we'll be sure to let the council know. But very supportive. They've been getting a lot of support from Main Streets across the country and other organizations. So fingers crossed.
Great update. Great update. Councilmember Somerville too. Let me clarify my comments. Again, I think that the bird scooter program should be a good one that isn't irritating the members of this council and our constituents. You know, I don't think it's an issue of we don't want it to continue. We want it to improve, as you say. So I agree with your comments as well, Councilmember.
Yeah, Mayor, absolutely. And I'll just add to that. I've seen some weird things. I've seen one of the bird scooters that somebody pulled the tracking box off of and left on a sidewalk. And it was there for quite some time. But I've also seen people literally braving, Curtis Street over to West Laramie and the semis on bird scooters. They're riding a pretty long distance across the span of the city, which I think is pretty cool. So,
yeah, it's a program that needs further refinement. And Councilmember Cumby, I know that what you were going to say just a moment ago is not that you're against the program. You just want the bird scooter contract to be fulfilled. And we want it to be a non-nuisance generating program. I think everybody on the council feels that way. Other updates. Councilmember Gabriel usually has some updates, maybe not this time.
Not council related.
All right, fair enough. I'll take the other ones, but I don't know how other people feel. I don't have any. I haven't seen anybody else's hand popping up. Okay. All right. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of this work session. City Clerk, thank you for carrying over this item. I saw that you even specified that in the posted agenda. Sorry for making you do a little extra work on that part. Thank you. City Manager, anything else for us this evening? Have you heard enough about our feelings about the bird scooters? Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you next time. All right. Good night, good evening, and thank you for being here with us.
Good night.
Night.